what I want to do today is to go into some perspectives that I've been looking at for a number of years, and I call them, this perspective is around gender. And I'm going to try to do this in about 25 minutes, so which is going to be always a challenge for me to keep my perspective and thoughts short. I think gender is one of the most fucked up concepts that contemporary people have. I'm a contemporary person, you're a contemporary person. And I think that a lot of people who are teaching Neo-Tantra or Western Tantra have really are really stuck in our, I'll say, a Western paradigm of gender, saying there are only two genders. Well, from an energetic point of view, as well as from, in a sense, to some extent, a behavioral point of view, over a period of time I've come to have an understanding of 7 different genders. Now, gender is different concept, different variable, so to speak, than sexual orientation. And the way I'm using the word gender is also different than the concept of what we call sex, male or female, as in terms of, often we think of it simply as far as genital anatomy, although it's biochemical and even more deeply it's genetic. And so we have our sex, which basically is male or female. We have sexual orientation, which we use the Kinsey scale, 0 to 6, 0 being really focused on the, quote, other sex, and 6 being really focused on the same sex as your sex. But we also have this concept of gender. And I think such concepts as the sacred masculine and sacred feminine, the masculine principle, the feminine principle, even yin and yang from Taoist perspectives when it's interpreted as male or female, I think are just really off the mark. And I think it is it's an albatross around our necks in terms of those of us who are in the field of sexuality, whether it be tantric or Western sexology or all of the above. And one of the great things that Kinsey did was look at sexual orientation. He went from heterosexual and homosexual, maybe even bisexual, to looking at the scale from 0 to 6. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he spread it out even further. And I think that it's that approach to looking at a really important concept in relationship to sexuality. Of course, gender has a lot more to do than with sexuality, but it's an integral part of our idea of sexuality, at least in terms of what people are teaching in Western Tantra. And to sort of look at a wider variation. And I've come, like I said, over time to see, with the perspective, that we can think of 7 different genders. And there's a wide variation in this. And I'm going to quickly give you the names. This is still, I mean, I've been looking at this for over 5 years closely, and I feel like I'm still a long ways from being able to understand and conceptualize and communicate a more thorough idea of this, but there seem to be 7 different genders. We have what I call Mars man and Venus woman, and that's what most people, that's the model that most people use. And I use the word Mars man and Venus woman because there was a book that was very popular here in the United States, maybe 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. I'll be very blatant. That book is a piece of shit. I can't state that how emphatic, how I think that what I couldn't get past the first 2 pages of what that author was writing. I think. So anyway, but so we've had this concept of a Mars man and Venus woman. I am not a Mars man. I'm not a Venus woman. It did not fit my self-experience of myself. When I first started teaching the course that I'm mainly focusing on in what I teach, called Path of the Sexual Shaman, a person contacted me. He was a friend of a friend, a mutual friend. And this person said that he'd been studying shamanism with a group of Native Americans in Canada and learning ceremony. He was very, very sincere about that. And that he called himself a two-spirit. A two-spirit sometimes in English is used to refer to a gay or lesbian person. In other words, a sexual orientation of same-sex focus. I don't use the word in that way. I don't think it was initially intended that way, but a lot of people interpret that. So all gay and lesbian people are definitely not two spirits by the way I'm meaning the term. The more commonly used term in Western sexology is transgender. The word that used to be used when I first started studying Western sexology in the mid-1970s was transsexual. That word has now sort of evolved and lost popularity, and now the more commonly used term is transgender. And a person who is born with a penis but strongly feels that she is really a woman, we would call a transgender female. From male anatomy to female anatomy, or at least identification. Transgender male, born with anatomy we associate with femaleness, as in vagina, and but feels like they are really a male person. And they may, both transgender males and females might choose for either hormonal therapy or anatomical reconstruction or construction. I'm not sure the exact terminology, and I found there's a lot of sensitivity in this arena. So if I'm using words that are not current or not appropriate, I apologize ahead of time, because I keep finding the language changing, and some people get really upset if you don't use the current in vogue wording. But anyway, so we have Mars man, Venus woman, transgender male, transgender female. I'm neither of those 4 categories, at least how I define myself. There is another category, or 2 categories I call androgynous male, androgynous female. They're sort of like 50-50. I'm going to come back and explain these a little bit more in a moment. And then there's a 7th category that I had really a real difficulty in finding language for. There's such a wide variation in this category. But I've developed some abilities to read people's energies. Whether they're accurate, maybe it's not accurate, but read their energies. I'm not saying read their mind, I'm saying reading their energetic patterns. And once I talked to a person, and I told her that when I read her energy, she fit in this 7th category. And after a little bit of discussion, she said she felt genderless. She didn't feel like she fit in any of these gender categories. And so I'm using the word genderless to refer to the 7th category. This may make a little more sense in a little bit when I come back and explain this a little bit more. So those are 7 categories. Now, I do use the word male-female. When I'm referring to male-female, I'm referring to the anatomy of the person, or in the case of transgender person, it could be the identity that they, how they identify themselves, regardless of whether they've had reconstruction surgery or not. Now, again, this is not sexual orientation I'm talking about. That's a whole other variable. And in fact, in the case of the transgender woman who was born male that I referred to a little bit earlier, she or he, this person actually is okay to be called either name, he or she, because it's really, at least in English and probably most languages, it's what word do you use in terms of pronoun. So I'll refer to this person as she for right now. So she, born male, went through hormonal and surgical changes and has remained married in a relationship with the same person who is female. So this female identified as heterosexual, but now that her partner is a she, she, I guess, from what I understand from this partner that I know, says that her partner, her wife, now in effect identifies as lesbian because she is very much in love with this person who is now female. So because her partner changed gender in a sense, so there's a whole other variable there, and I'm not talking about sexual orientation. I'm discussing this. So Mars men and Venus women. Mars men and Venus women. There was a movie with the I can't remember the movie now. I can't think of it. Sylvester Stallone and these 5 or 6 other really macho guys. And they were, old war heroes getting old and going and do something else to save the day for somewhere. And these are really hunks. They are really hunks. Big muscles, macho men with guns and knives and fists and kickboxing. And I looked at their energy and tried to read the energy. Every one of them was a Mars man. And I thought, So I looked at a number of the quarterbacks of American football. And every quarterback I've ever looked at, and I've not done a thorough analysis here, because I read their energies, every one of them energetically fits my concept of Mars man. So I thought, what about the cheerleaders, the female cheerleaders for these football teams, again, American football teams. And one of the most famous cheerleader groups is called the Dallas Cowgirls, because the cheerleaders for the Dallas Cowboys. That's the name of the football team. So I looked at the Dallas Cowgirls, went on the website, and had some very beautiful, attractive women there. So it was my pleasure to observe. And read their energies, and 10 of the 12 women on that squad fit my definition of Venus woman. So here we have the jocks and the cheerleaders and the macho, masculine men. They can be real hunks. I mean, they can be really yummy when you look at them. And so I thought, there's something about this that people who have these energetic structures have a tendency to go into this lifestyle and a way of expressing themselves. Then we have transgender men and transgender women who were born with an anatomy, and somewhere along the way they begin to feel strongly that they don't fit that anatomical description, and often some of the people describe themselves as really feeling like they want to be in an anatomy that is different, like the other sex. And however, I've also found some people, well, if you look back in the 1920s, there were, you may have heard of Amelia Earhart, who was a pilot. She broke lots of records and was trying to fly around the world when her plane crashed somewhere in the Pacific, and she's never been found. But I remember seeing a photo of her, and I said, So I started reading her energy, and she fit my definition, energetically, of a transgender male. In other words, female, but in the culture at that point in time, there was probably no concept, no room for someone who might, in today's cultural context, say, oh, I'm not this gender, I'm not this sex, I'm this sex, and identify as transgender. But this was a very, a person who was quite an adventurer, breaking all sorts of records. And then I found another pilot, a female body pilot, called, her book was West with the Night. She was an English woman born in Africa and was raised champion horses and broke records of flying in planes. And I started reading her energies, another transgender reading. And I found 3 different really female body pilots back in the 1920s and 30s who were breaking all sorts of records with airplanes. And they all fit this category. And what happens is I started to look at their anatomy and say, there's something, I just had this sense. And that's why I started even considering the possibility of, quote, reading their energies, not just simply looking at them. And they all fit the transgender category. Now, would they have been transgender today in terms of how the culture? I don't know. But they have that energetic pattern. Now we come to the next 2 categories, androgynous male, androgynous female. And I started noticing that many people who are in the arts, acting, music, painting, when I read their energies, they fit the category, in my reading, energetic category, of either androgynous male or androgynous female. And I found that very interesting, because what did I do in high school? I didn't play football. Played some baseball and softball in elementary school. By the time I got to high school, I was majoring in music, and I went off to college to major in music. I changed into sociology after, because a lot of things were happening and my interests were changing. And I wasn't that good in music compared to, I went to a very fine music school, and so many people were so much better than me. I said, oh, I'm not going to make it in this world. I love music, but that's not going to be my that's not going to be my bread and butter. And so a lot of people going to the arts have this androgynous male-female characteristics when I read them energetically. Now, that is, again, not sexual orientation. And then there's this 7th category, which I now call genderless. And I kept thinking, whom do I know or have met or seen that fit in this category? And I had this intuition. In San Francisco, when I first got to San Francisco in 1973, I think it was already established by then, a very, very important parade in San Francisco called the Gay Day Parade. And that now is called LGBT. I think that's the languaging for it. Excuse the noise here. There's all these alarms coming in from 90 and 20,000 things. And it's now the Pride Parade. It's a very, very big day where people are, particularly of gay, lesbian, and bi or sexual orientations, come out and just celebrate. I mean, the streets of San Francisco, hundreds of people, a long parade, celebrating something other than heterosexual norm. And the one of the most popular groups in that parade are known as dykes on bikes. Dyke in English being, of course, a very pejorative term referring to lesbian women. But what they did was they took the term and just turned it around and empowered themselves with it, all the intensity around that term and applied it to themselves. And here you had, I don't know, 50 to 100 different women with their leathers out there and almost bare-chested. It looked like in times. And they're on motorcycles. And many of them had their femme girlfriend behind them, to use a stereotype, but I swear that there was a whole lot of people fitting that stereotype there. And, you know, here on this Mission Street down in San Francisco comes this contingent of, 50, 100 motorcycles of lesbian women just celebrating their, I am lesbian, or in this case, dykes on bikes. Butch haircuts, and leather, the real stereotype, but and I don't mean the stereotype in a negative way, because, people get into the lifestyle and sort of have fun with it. It's costume. It's theater is what it is. Although some people identify with certain things so much they forget that it's theater. So I found, a lot of those women, those quote dykes, were, but when I read their energies, they were this seventh category. But also in that same category were the screaming queen gay guys. The gay guys who really just dress up and with screaming queen. I hope that translates into your languages. And it's a very, very positive term from my point of view. And they too, many of them, fit in that category. And then I was talking to this person, actually taking my course, and I did a follow-up, and I read people's energies in this Path of Sexual Trauma and Training, in terms of, here's how I read your energies as far as your gender. And she explained that she was seventh gender, but here was, she was not any appearance of a dyke on a bike. She was not a screaming queen. I thought she could have been a model. She had long legs and slender in movements, and quite attractive. And so I don't know what you think of this, but here's what my reading of you is that you're seventh gender, and you have dykes on bikes and screaming queen gay guys, and she went on to say that she felt genderless. So it's not always the lifestyle of appearance you take; it's more like how you identify and how you express. So those are 7 different genders. Now, that was really important for me to realize that just because I don't fit the Mars man model doesn't mean that what I like to do is out of it. I'm rather heterosexual. I'm not a Kinsey zero, but clearly I didn't fit into the macho male model in terms of identifying what I do in my life and how I see the world, relate to the world. And it's in music, and to say that when I think of myself as being sort of 50% masculine, 50% feminine, whatever that means, I have no idea what that means, because it's a great book to read here about looking at gender. Margaret Mead, around the 1920s, I think it was published in the 1930s, a book called Sex and Temperament in Primitive Society. Margaret Mead being a really avant-garde anthropologist in the first half and the middle half of the 20th century. Did some very important research on sexuality in cultures around the world. And primitive societies was not a negative term in that context. It's now become negative. It's out of vogue, but in the context it's not negative. She was finding that a lot of cultures, the men, the male anatomy and the female anatomy people don't always their behavior patterns don't always fit our Western, European, American ideas of maleness and femaleness. So that's all relative. But anyway, I feel like, well, I'm sort of a combination of both, maleness and femaleness, whatever that might be. And so to think of myself as androgynous, it fits right on for me. So, what I'm proposing is that we really drop this masculine and feminine differentiation, and I'm not even suggesting we start classifying people by these 7 categories, but what this did for me was say there is a diversity. Now, where this comes from is I'm talking about us being made up of frequencies and intensities. That's the most, pretty much the most intrinsic, most primordial aspect, a way of looking at ourselves or anything in existence. But in terms of a more practical sense, we're made up of structures and functions and abilities. And the way I'm using the term right now is structures like the light body or the spirit body. And these structures have functions. But the way these structures relate to each other, interact with each other, and make things happen is what I call abilities, energetic abilities. Now, what basically a way to make a distinction here is that the energetic abilities of Mars men and Venus women are different than transgender males and females, and different than androgynous men and women, and different than genderless people. Now, there's a lot of overlap, but there's some uniquenesses that are similar patterns for androgynous people. And those patterns or combination of patterns, that it's inherent in us. What I'm saying is our gender it's inherent in this incarnation. And because it's not a question of lifestyle, because it's going to be dependent upon cultural context, but there is these different energetic patterns which are different, and these different categories are sort of like an aptitude or proclivity or a tendency to experience and express ourselves in different ways, so that people who are born, in fact, androgynous, going to have a tendency to gravitate toward the arts. They might want to play football and do other things, but there is sort of an inherent tendency to go into the types of things that androgynous people have to go into. Now, there's also a great deal of individual variation. There's a great deal of societal imposition and socialization. I remember as a kid, boys would come up to each other and hit each other on the arm, really hard. And the idea was to say, oh, that didn't hurt me. The fuck it didn't. It hurt me every time. I didn't understand that game. I did not like it. So I didn't want to be a part of that. So what I think is important is that whatever you or your clients feel inclined to, how they experience and express reality or what they do in the world, is that they be supported in that, because it may very well be that that is sort of almost an innate, for this lifetime at least, innate expression there's expressing what they are sort of already have aptitudes or tendencies to do. And that doesn't mean they can't be good at, androgynous people can't be good at football. It just may mean that it might be easier to go into music than to go into football. But if you love football, and go for it, or the point is, now we're, at least in the United States, the transgender people are being much, much more supported, and legally and socially, for example. So basically, this is a concept to say, do your thing, be yourself, and know that people can have sort of inherent, innate aptitudinal differences because they sort of come in with some energetic pattern tendencies, and how they express it will vary from person to person, but it's totally okay for them to be themselves. And so just because a person doesn't fit the Mars man or Venus woman model doesn't mean they're not okay, whatever criteria. So those are some of the thoughts I wanted to present about gender. It's I'm still looking into trying to understand how to explain this much more in an energetic pattern perspective. But I just want you to keep in mind that your clients and yourself and your loved ones and partners, they can have, we can have many more variations than perhaps just male and female. And to continue to use masculine and feminine, I really think really takes us down the wrong path. It brings us into two categories because we have masculine and feminine. We assume we know what everyone means by that, and that is not the case, but everyone assumes that. So as much as possible, I think it's best to drop any perspective of what a male is and what a female is or should be, and to say, what is it you want to do? Where you feel inclined to go and support a person in doing that. Okay. All right. So, gosh, we've been going forever here, it seems like. So, Tara, any thing we want to... we don't really have time for questions. So I have another appointment coming up in just a few minutes before we get started. And half hour late.
Yes. I don't know, because it's 5 to 12 here. Yeah. Nearly midnight. So if there is one urgent question, I will want to ask the student to come and ask it. And then maybe we close the session also for you, because you have another session coming up.
All right.
I understand. Yeah?
Great.
So I will ask, is there anyone who wants to ask a question for Ray? It's really urgent and important. But
I hope you can connect with them later if you have questions.
So they ask if they have questions later on, if they could connect with you by mail or Skype or...
Maybe by Skype, but to email me, being quadriplegic, it is hell and very slow for me to type. But if you did maybe a verbal interaction, maybe you can do that. Or if you want to bring me back another class, just answer questions sometime.
Yeah. So, okay, I will see if there are many questions. In that case, we will book you another class, and otherwise people will ask them individually.
All right.
And it's always possible to have private sessions with you, right?
Yes, and also my website, sexualshaman.com, and if you're interested in the path of sexual shaman training, I can tell you about that. But yeah, and I do individual sessions as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, it's a treat seeing you differently today, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you.
And folks, it's been nice with you the last few months, connecting with you. I hope some sort of energetic experience was experienced by you today in our 2 hours of meditation, energetic ceremony before. So I send you all hugs, wishing you well in your journey to becoming in tantric energy masters of whatever inclination you may be inclined. So, folks, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.